Sure. It was a little warm here. I turned up.
Yeah.
Should I crack a window?
Good old days with the. Remember the good old days with the tent? All at Given. Yeah, it's alright. He always wanted to know what it would smell like if I was in a balloon. Like, just completely. Moving up. No, we're good. Thanks. Okay, so let's learn. Continue getting ready for Purim. All right, yeah, it's one of those Yom that, and I just mentioned this to a friend of mine. Even if you if you laid out for me all the Yusidus, all the concepts, all the ideas that are sort of behind Purim, I would never come up with Purim. You know what I mean? It's one of those things. Once Purim is there, so you sort of you can constantly find more layers to it. But no matter with all the layers that we know, we never come up with Purim on our own, which means that there's definitely more layers to it that we're not getting to. But as Hashem, we'll try to uncover. We'll try to get to at least one deeper layer of Purim tonight. Okay, so we'll begin. Let's get through a few questions, and then we'll introduce a site that I think will help us understand a little bit deeper what Purim is about. Okay, we'll begin like this. So every Yontif, Purim is no different. Every Yontif has a particular date. So Purim, so Pesach is Tesvav Nisan, Rosh Hashanah is Aleph Tishrei, and so Purim is not so clear what it is. Yudalad Adar, Tesvav Adar, regular Purim. 15th day of Purim, Shushan Purim. But what's interesting is that Chazal say, Mishenichnas Adar is Marvin B'Simcha. Mishenichnas Adar Marvin B'Simcha means that despite the fact that the Yontif of Purim is one particular day or two particular days or so on in the month of Adar, but Chazal understood that Adar somehow, the entire month is defined and redefined because of that Yontif that's called Purim. Now, what does that tell us about the Yontif of Purim in the fact that it sort of redefines and sort of makes itself known throughout the entire month? So the answer is, and what this tells us about Purim is the following idea: the true definition of months and that time period that's defined as a month, that's based on the moon. Regarding the sun, when it comes to the solar year, all it is a demarcation point of a year. From one point until the Earth gets all the way around the rotation of the sun to get back to the same spot, that's a full year. But there are no, demarcation points of months in terms of the sun. The demarcation point of months, and there being a significance to 30 days or 29 and some odd days, that's based on the lunar year. That's based on the lunar idea. So every month, the moon goes through its cycle. The fact that the entire month of Adar is being defined based on the Yontif of Purim, is already Marvin B'Simcha. It already tells us that the Yontif of Adar is going to be a Yontif that's related to the moon, that it's befrat the celebration of the moon. And because of that, since it's a moon celebration, it's already Mishenichnas Adar, the entire month, which is a lunar cycle, is affected by that. Now this relationship between the moon and the Yontif of Purim is not... we do find this. For example, obviously the hero of Purim, one of the heroes of Purim is Esther. The name Esther, her name was Esther, but the word Esther comes from the word Tahara, which means a moon. So her name in Persian and Aramaic and so on means moon. So Esther Malka already means moon. The Yontif of Purim is the moon, the Yontif, that the entire month of Adar is affected by that. Also, for example, I mentioned that we have such an idea that's called Shushan Purim, right? The 15th day of of Adar. That's the Purim for cities that are walled. They had a walled city from the time of who? Of Yeshua ben Nun, right? Why Yeshua ben Nun? So it's famous Yerushalmi, right? Really, it should be from the time of Shushan. That's when the miracle took place in the city of Shushan. But in that case, Yerushalayim at that point, the walls were destroyed. It would have been left out. It would have not have been considered a walled city. So Chazal, the Nevi'im, sort of to make sure that Yerushalayim is part of that status of a walled city. So they pulled the date back, not from Shushan, but going back to a time when Yerushalayim has a wall. When does Yerushalayim have a wall? Yerushalayim had a wall already just 70 years earlier. It had a wall from the times of the first base of Mikdash. But the demarcation point that they pulled back to was from the times of Yeshua ben Nun. Yeshua ben Nun. Chazal say regarding Yeshua ben Nun and his relationship to Moshe Rabbeinu is Pnei Moshe ke Pnei Chama. That Moshe is compared to the sun. Pnei Yeshua ke Pnei Levana. And Yeshua ben Nun is compared to the moon. And so the Indian of Purim, which is a Yontif that's celebrating the moon, it's the Indian of the moon, Sihara, and Davka Shushan Purim is the 15th of the month, which is called Sihar Bishlimus, the moon in its fullness, right? Beginning of the month is nothing, and it becomes a full moon at the 15th day. So Davka Shushan Purim, which is the Yontif, this is a type of Purim which is celebrating Davka, the day that the moon is full, is pulled back to Yeshua ben Nun. That's the demarcation point to define a city as being worthy of Shushan Purim, is Yeshua ben Nun, whose face is like the moon. So this Indian of Purim, again, we see this Indian that Purim is related to the moon, that it's a simcha of the moon. The moon is besimcha. Now, the moon, why does the moon need to be happy? What's bothering the moon so much? Well, what bothers the moon goes back to the very beginning of creation, the story that we know that in the beginning the Rebbeinu Shalom made the world in such a way it should have been Shnei Maris HaGedolim, the sun and the moon should be the same size, the same way in a state of union. Because again, the moon complained. The moon was diminished, and because of that, the moon has some agmas nefesh. So the yontif of Purim is a yontif that's celebrating the moon. It's a simcha of the moon, which means on some level the moon is going to be able on the yontif of Purim to retain its status of kipnei chama, to become more like the sun. So you have to investigate that. You have to figure out what exactly does that mean. What does it mean the moon being diminished, the tsar of the moon, and what is Adar, what is Purim? Fix that. Okay, that's Aleph. Days. I mentioned that every yontif has a particular date. Now, what's ironic, what's amazing, one of the biggest pellets about Purim is that there is no specific date. It depends where you live, right? If you live in an open city, so Purim is the 14th. If you live in a walled city, it's the 15th, Shushan Purim. Now, what's interesting is okay, I guess if we wrap our heads around it, we're used to it, so there's two different dates, depending on where you live. Okay, it's an interesting thing. But the truth is, we find in Chazal that not only, like if you're an open city person, if you're a New Yorker, then it's the 14th. And then Shushan Purim is completely irrelevant to you. And if you're a Yerushalayim Dicker and you live in a walled city from the times of Yeshua ben Nun, then Purim is Shushan Purim, and Yudalit is irrelevant. That's not really true. The Yontif of Purim has to be seen as a Yontif that has both of these days, and they complete each other on some level. L'mashal, even in Halacha we find such an idea. The Halacha is that it's Rishalmi. The Rishalmi says, Ben Krach, if you have a person that lives in a walled city, and so his Purim should be Shushan Purim. But whatever the case may be, he happens to make a mistake and he reads the Megillah and he keeps Purim on the 14th. So says the Rishalmi, he's Yaitziv B'diavad. He's Yaitziv B'diavad. Now that already means that even people that are Shushan Purim Dika people, they have to recognize the 14th is also being a Yontif. Maybe not, it's not the way it should be, they should keep Shushan Purim, but if B'diavad they kept the other Yontif, no, they're Yaitziv B'diavad. Which means already Shushan Purim recognizes regular 14th of Purim. And the same thing is the opposite. 14th, a Purim of Prazim, of open cities, which is the 14th. Is Shushan Purim to us nothing? No, it's not nothing. There's a lot of, Tzaddikim bring down, there's tons of marmakamis about this and sources that talk about this. Even in Chazal, there's hints to this as well, that Shushan Purim is a big day. Shushan Purim is a big day. And even those that are 14 other Purim dickers, like open cities, they still have to recognize Shushan Purim as being significant. Not just that you don't say Tachnun and so on. But even some level of Simchas Yantif exists on Shushan Purim as well. And so the way to think of Purim in terms of 14 and 15 are not like, okay, there's only one Purim. Happens to be if you're in a walled city, then it's the 15th, and you're open city, it's the 14th. No. There's a recognition. Each side recognizes the other. Shushan Purim recognizes the 14th day of Purim as Purim, and the 14th day of Purim recognizes Shushan Purim as well. And so this is something that we need to figure out. The truth is, it needs explanation. It needs explanation because the definition of Purim in the Megillah is, the pasuk says, "Kayamim asher nachu b'mayudim." It's the day Purim, whenever Purim is, it's supposed to be the day that particular community rested from conflict. As we fought against the Amalekim, against our enemies, the day before Purim, and the day that we commemorate as Purim is the day of Menucha. It's a day of peace. It's of tranquility. That's why it's celebrated. If it's an open city, they fought the wars against the enemies on the 13th, and they rested on the 14th. And if it's a walled city like Shushan, they continued fighting on the 14th, and they rested on the 15th. So whatever the day of Menucha is, that's the day of Purim. So again, if you tell me that the open cities only recognize the 14th, and walled cities only recognize the 15th, okay, fine, because each community, each type of city had its day of rest at a different point. But once you're telling me in halacha and in the way that Klal Yisrael firzach, the way we're noig, the way we celebrate Purim, is that even open cities recognize Shushan Purim, and walled cities recognize regular Purim, 14th of Purim. So what's going on? I thought the definition of Purim is the day of Menucha. So why would Shushan Purim recognize the 14th as a yontif if that was not the day of Menucha yet? And why would the 14th recognize the 15th day of Purim if that wasn't their day of Menucha either? Menucha means the day that you now rest. That's they're done resting. It's finished, right? So it must be at some level that the yontif of Purim is incomplete unless you have these two sides complementing each other: regular Purim and Shushan Purim. And since we have to figure what that is, what exactly is this Indian of Purim that requires these two dates, and what is it in particular about walled cities? Listen. Again, like I said, if we were there, I don't know if we would come up with that nakuda. Like, okay, Shushan had its Indian that it continued fighting, and it had its day of rest was the 15th. And because of that, Chazal defined, okay, now every walled city, that's the quality, that's how Chazal defined, that's how they saw the uniqueness of the city of Shushan in the fact that it had a wall. And Dafka from the times of Yeshua ben Nun, as I mentioned before, how do we understand this? How do we put this together? What is Purim that you need both the 14th and the 15th to come together? So those are the two hours. We have the yontif of Purim being a yontif that's about the moon, and this Indian of regular Purim and Shushan Purim.
You have even more halacha.
Say it again.
You have even more kavod halacha Purim Sholosh. But the fact has to keep on
Purim Sholosh, right? There's such a thing, right? Exactly. It was last year, right? One final question. We know Chazal say that it's based on a pasuk in Megillah Esther. Chazal say a famous line, Hadar kiblua b'mei Achashverosh, which means that from the times of Har Sinai, so he said Nasa v'nishma, but we also know that there was a little part of us that was a little bit hesitant in our accepting the Torah. Ad kedei kach, that famously Chazal say, Kafalim har kigigis, the Rebbeinu Shem to hold the mountain over our heads. And so Chazal say that ever since that point, we accepted the Torah, but there was something missing in our Kabbalah. And it's the way to understand that is if it's not just a matter of, the Torah was given to us and there was a part of us that lacked acceptance. If there's a part of us that lacks acceptance, it means there's a part of the Torah that wasn't given. It's a relationship. It's like a marriage. It's a bond between people. If one person is closed, it means to that extent the relationship doesn't exist. So Torah is a bond, is a relationship. So to whatever degree we were shut off and we were not accepting, to that degree the Torah was not given. It says the Gemara until Purim, because of the Havas and Eitz, because of the miracle of Purim, the Jewish people fully accepted the Torah, and whatever issue was holding us back by Har Sinai was removed, and we were able to fully accept it. Okay. Now, the fact that Hadar Kibul Mechashresh, the fact that we fully accepted Har Sinai, and whatever that issue was removed, it can't just be a coincidence that the miracle that removed that was revolving around getting rid of Amalek, Mechias Amalek. If Purim is a yontif that's revolving around our enemy Amalek and our victory over Amalek, so it must be that it was Amalek from the very beginning that was creating that mania, creating that obstacle, that barrier between us and a full acceptance of Torah. And now when you have, and you do find this already, right? That Amalek's first appearance is already, after we left Mitzrayim, comes to block us from Har Sinai. And the context of us coming to Har Sinai, as we know, is V'yisum Erfidim, is that we're coming from that struggle with Amalek. which means that the inyan of Amalek, there's something about Amalek which holds the Jewish people back from fully accepting the Torah. And in order to fully accept the Torah, we have to overcome that klipa of Amalek. And so, if we could define for ourselves better what exactly the aspect of Torah was that we were bothered by, that we were holding ourselves back from accepting, that'll give us a clear understanding of what Amalek is about. And because that's going to be the Nakuda, right? Because again, whatever Amalek, that inyan of Amalek is holding us back from accepting that aspect of Torah. Purim comes to remove Amalek. Now we could fully accept Torah properly. So what was it about Torah that we weren't fully on board with already from the beginning of Har Sinai? In other words, what aspect of Torah is Amalek coming to hold us back from fully accepting? So there's a well-known Chazal. This is not my Chiddush. This is already from the Medrash Tanchum. It's well-known. We'll just explain it. The Medrash says that there's two parts to Torah, as we know. There's Torah Shebechsav and Torah Sheba'al Peh. Says the Medrash, Torah Shebechsav, the Jewish people had no problem. That was never an issue. Nasiv Nishim was fully 100% for Torah Shebechsav. Torah Sheba'al Peh, however, the oral Torah, that already is not so pashut. The Jewish people, Torah Sheba'al Peh is difficult, it's hard. That takes a lot of Mesiras Nefesh, a lot of acceptance, and that the Jewish people were unwilling to fully embrace. Until Purim comes, and we overcome Amalek, and because of the experience of us overcoming Amalek and Manes, now we fully accept not just Torah, we fully accept Torah Sheba'al Peh, which means that there's something about Torah Sheba'al Peh that Amalek comes and whispers in our ear, you can't get it. Like Torah Sheba'al Peh is too hard. Torah Sheba'al Peh is too hard. And Amalek is the Meniyah. Amalek is the obstacle, not just Tam. Amalek is the obstacle specifically for a Jewish person accepting full-heartedly Torah Sheba'al Peh. And from the very beginning, that's what Amalek was about. And even though Amalek wasn't successful in holding us back, Baruch Hashem, from receiving Torah Sheba'al Peh, but they were successful to a certain degree to hold us back from accepting it b'ahava. And it had to be forced upon us, which means already there was some lack of acceptance. Comes Purim, and we're able to overcome Amalek with the Nes of Purim. Now we can fully embrace Torah Sheba'al Peh. So we have this inyan that Amalek in particular is the klipa that holds us back from Torah Sheba'al Peh. Now, two points, two ha'aras to make on that. First of all, what does it mean that we accept the Torah Shebechsav, not Torah Sheba'al Peh? This is a very simple question. How can you have Torah Shebechsav without Torah Sheba'al Peh? I mean, with Torah Shebechsav, I mean, you have other religions that just have Torah Shebechsav, and they just simply ignore psukim. They just ignore ideas. They're not asking the obvious questions of what are tetafos. What does that mean? So it's not possible to have Torah Shebechsav without Torah Sheba'al Peh. So what does it mean to accept Torah Shebechsav and not Torah Sheba'al Peh? That's Aleph. So it must be that when we talk about Torah Sheba'al Peh, we're talking about something in a much more broader sense than just technically the oral tradition to explain psukim. Because you can't have psukim without that oral tradition. So what does it mean then? What's the bechin of Torah Sheba'al Peh that the Jewish people are unable to accept as long as Amalek is there? And once we get rid of Amalek, this inyan Torah Sheba'al Peh we're able to accept. That's number one. Number two, if Amalek is coming specifically to hold us back from whatever this inyan of Torah Sheba'al Peh is, it must be related back to how the Chumash describes the effect of Amalek upon us. It says in Pasuk in Parshas B'Shalach, when Amalek attacked us, Amalek physically attacks us, but it comes because we ourselves were, sort of in an Amalek mindset. And the Pasuk says that we were in the place of Refidim, and so on. The Pasuk says that the Jewish people began to ask the following question: Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu amayim. Is Hashem with us or not? Hayesh Havai b'kirbeinu amayim. And Chazal say, you're asking such a question? That's an Amalek Dikenya. To ask such a question, Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu amayim is an Amalek Dikenya question. Is Hashem with you or not? Okay, so you read, and that's why Amalek attacks. Amalek attacks because we already brought Amalek into our heads. Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu amayim. So, in other words, the pasuk is defining for us that the klipa, the issue of Amalek is that question: is Hashem with us or not? Now, what we just established, however, as well, is that Amalek equals a lack of accepting of Torah Sheba'al Peh, which means that question of Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu amayim, which is Amalek, that question must be a question that stops a person from accepting Torah Sheba'al Peh. So, again, we have to figure all this out. That somehow, again, this inyan of Torah Sheba'al Peh must be deeply connected to that question of Vayeshem B'Kirov Mayim. If a person even asking that question, is Hashem with us or not, means that you're not going to be able to accept Torah Sheba'al Peh. To accept Torah Sheba'al Peh, that question has to be irrelevant. So you have to define for ourselves what that is. Why is Torah Sheba'al Peh? Again, what does Torah Sheba'al Peh mean in this context? How is it unable to be accepted if you ask that question of Vayeshem B'Kirov Mayim? And I guess on a larger scale, what does that question mean? What does it mean, Vayeshem B'Kirov Mayim? What does it mean? Is Hashem with us or not? Everyone, even Rashi brings down from Chazal. It's like, you're eating the man, you're chewing on man, right? Surrounded by the Anania Kavod, and you're asking, is Hashem with you or not? Like, how's it even possible? The truth is, the Zohar Kadosh already comments on this, and the Zohar says a phenomenal thing. The Zohar says that the question of Hayesh Hashem B'Kirov Mayim, the problem with the question was not so much the question. The question makes sense. The Zohar says the problem is they should have realized is that it's both. It's both. Yesh Hashem B'Kirov and also Ayin. Hashem is with you and He's also not with you. That was the mistake of the Jewish people, to think that it's an all or nothing type of question. The options are Hashem is with us or He's not with us. The question is fine. The question is not fine. It's logical. The problem is that it's both true. Okay, so fine. Those are all the problems. We'll try to begin to have an answer. Okay. From the time that we're very little and we're introduced to life and to Yiddishkeit, there's a certain formula, I guess you can say, that we're used to thinking of. And when you first think about it, it's certainly not wrong. It makes a lot of sense to think of it like this. But it's mamash amalek. That's what I mean. So we're taught the following idea, is that there's such a thing as avoida, and there's such a thing as tachlis. Avoida versus tachlis. What I mean? Avoida versus tachlis means the following thing: is that a person is put in a position, you're born into the world, and you're raw. You're underdeveloped. There's a tachlis. There's a goal. There's a place that you have to reach. That place that you have to reach is a place of the Rebbeinu Shalom. You have to get to the Rebbeinu Shalom. You have to get to a place of elikus. You have to get to a place of divinity. You have to get to a place of kedusha. You have to get to a place of menucha. V'yar menucha ki tov. Right? You have to get to that place that's called Shabbos. That place that's called holy. That place that's called tachlis. The place that's called echad. But you're not there. So a person therefore has no choice but to be an oived. You have to work, and you have to accomplish, you have to fight battles in order to eventually get to that place that's called tachlis. There's a space, there's a time period, there's a bechina that's called avoida, that's called work, and then there's a place that's called tachlis, that's called the place to get to, that's called the destination. Okay? Klal Yisrael is Mitzrayim, we're in the middle, we're trying to get to the destination, Eretz Yisrael. And Olam Haz is Daimler Proizda, right? Everyone has heard this, and some of you have been, triggered by these things. Olam Haz is Daimler Proizda. This world is called a Proizda, a hallway, whatever it is. In order to get to the Tachlis, which is the banquet hall, whatever is Olam Haba. So there's Avoida, and then there's Tachlis. So that's okay. That's okay to believe if the distance between the place of Avodah and the place of Tachlis is not too far. It's not too far. Because if you could see it from a distance, so to speak, right? If you could imagine, it's like, okay, you know what? If I put in a few years, or I put in even a little bit more than a few years, and I'll get to that place of Tachlis, then fine. Then I could handle, if I could see the carrot dangling in front of me, then I could put in the work to get there. I could have Avodah, and I could put in years of avodah in order to get to tachlis. As long as that tachlis is first of all within my sight, and in the very least within my possible ability to reach. So even if I don't see it, if I can at least know that I can get there, that's already an end zone, a goal that is conceptually within reach. That's called Torah Shebechsav. I mentioned before that the Jewish people, again, we were offered in our Sinai. There's two asar. There's Torah Shebechsav and Torah Sheba'al Peh. Yes, it doesn't mean Torah Shebechsav without Torah Sheba'al Peh. You can't. So it doesn't mean any pasuk obviously needs its explanation. But when we say Tarsh B'chsav without Tarsh B'al it means, of course, it means oral explanations. Again, otherwise you can't open a Pasuk in Chumash. But it means a Yiddishkeit where the goal, the tachlis, the place of menucha, the place of achdus, the place of elikus, the place where you can sit back, lis anig al Hashem, and truly derive pleasure and ecstasy in the aura of the divine presence that you've reached, is within reach. It's possible. Tarsh B'chsav is something that's munach bekeren zavis, chazal v'lashon like that. Tarsh B'chsav is sitting in the corner. Anyone wants to get it, you could come get it. It's mesuyim. There's only so many words in Tarsh B'chsav. It might be a lot of words, but it's only so many. And the basic explanations of Tarsh B'al to explain what Tarsh B'chsav means. It doesn't just mean the book. It means a Yiddishkeit that is mesuyim, a Yiddishkeit that is finite, a Yiddishkeit that has an end to it. And you could be, and if you start from Bereshis, so because I know if I, again, with enough pages and enough Shnai Mikra over enough weeks, I'll get to the Zayis HaBracha. It's a hard mahalach, but I know I can get there. I see the end. So if I know from the very beginning that the end is reachable and it's practical and I see it, I can put in the work to get there. But what does it mean, a Yiddishkeit of Tarsh B'al Peh? Tarsh B'al Peh doesn't just mean the oral explanations of Psukim. Tarsh B'al Peh, the Bechina of Tarsh B'al Peh means endless. It means endless. Tarsh B'al Peh means that there's always a deeper explanation to anything that you're learning, right? Which means that what you're learning, you might have thought it was tachlis. You might have thought that was the end. It's not the end. There's more and more layers to it. This is true in learning, and there's also a Yiddishkeit that's Tarsh B'al Peh dik. A Yiddishkeit that's Tarsh B'al Peh dik is a Yiddishkeit which is about reaching the Rabbanu Shalom, getting to the Rabbanu Shalom. The Rabbanu Shalom is Ein Sof. In other words, how is God appearing to us in Yiddishkeit? Is he appearing to us as a God that's reachable, or is he appearing to us as a God that's unreachable? Tarsh B'chsav, the Jewish people accepting only Tarsh B'chsav means the Rabbanu Shalom coming to us and being offered to us as a God that's reachable. Hard, it's a mahalach, it'll take 120 years, but you can get there. It's mesuyim, just like Tarsh B'chsav is finite. The Rabbanu Shalom, as he would have been accepted and given to us, so to speak, in a world where there was just Tarsh B'chsav, it means a God that's reachable. So it means there is a certain point, in a not a subjective, but an objective point of where this is where the Rebbeinu Shalom is. That tachlis, that is the gvul of Eretz Yisrael. You go over this line, that means you're in a state of menucha. You've hit the Rebbeinu Shalom. Okay, so I could get there. Tarsh B'al Peh means the Rebbeinu Shalom is not being offered to us with Tarsh B'al Peh. He's not being offered to us in such a finite way. He's being offered to us as Ein Sof, as the infinite God. An infinite God means that as far deep as you go, there's always going to be more layers. And so where is that point where you can say objectively, I've reached the point of menucha? It's impossible. It's impossible. And so this is what the Jewish people are being held back by when they're being offered Tarsh B'al Peh. Because Tarsh B'al Peh means a life of where it's an endless search and you're never going to get there. The carrot is always going to be beyond reach. This ultimately is what Amalek whispers in the Jewish people's ears, which are, you're getting yourself involved in a program that you're always trying to get to a tachlis and you're never going to get there. It's just impossible. Philosophically, it's impossible. And because of that, this is why the question of Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu Moyin, is Hashem with us or not? What's the question? Not like, are we there yet? That's like every kid asks from the back seat, are we there yet? That's Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu Moyin. Now the kid asks that, he doesn't mean, again, sometimes the kid asks that honestly. He wants to know, are we there yet? When the Jewish people asked, they weren't fetching, are we there yet? They were asking legitimately, are we there yet? That's Amalektic. Why? Because that's a question that will result in yish, and it will result in just giving up if you are then given a world of Tarsh B'al Peh. If you're asking the question of Ayishim B'Kirbeinu Moyin, in other words, are we there yet? And there's a place of tachlis, of destination. And the question is, how do I get there? When are we going to get there? And so on. If that point of destination is impossible to get there, that's not, you can't even begin the process. So the Jewish people thinking in terms of Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu Moyin means that they can't accept Tarsh B'al Peh. And if they have Tarsh B'al Peh, it has to be forced upon them. This is why Haman, for example, which is coming, Amalek 2.0 is Haman. So Haman in the Megillah, even when he's given everything, so he always has this, in his version in Klippa of Hayeshem Mekubim, the Chol Zaynenu Shoiveli, right? He says everything, all of his accomplishments, his wife, his children, his wealth, his power, all being paraded in front of him. He says, Mom is nothing. It's nothing to me as long as Mordechai Yehuda is there and he's not bowing down to me. There's always that thing that he's not, that is beyond his reach and he's not satisfied by. This is a bubbling from that klipa of Amalek in its most subtle form of Vayeshem B'Kirbeinu Mayim. In Haman's life, it emerges as always happening. Sort of, he establishes a carrot that's impossible, right? So you can say, Haman, what are you making yourself crazy for? It's impossible. Mordechai is stubborn. He's not going to bow down to you. But to Haman, he's dafka picking something that's the impossibility. Think about it. He wants to destroy the Jewish people. Haman is, Chazal say about Haman, less man the other lishna bishak. No one knew Lashon Har like Haman. Haman wasn't a sophisticated person. It wasn't Stam a Russia. It was Mislabish within him, the Sitra Achram Amish. She was a evil incarnate. And Haman understood the power and the significance of the Jewish people. And he's planning something that Be'etzim he knows is an impossibility. Lahashmal alabe, and more than that, B'yoy Mechad. Right? Even his great descendant, it's a Mishaga, Yom Echad. So what's Haman doing? He's planning something that's an impossibility. And you said that itself is the klip of Haman, right? The whole klip of Amalek is that there's a plan, there's a avodah, there's a certain tachlis, and that tachlis is impossible to reach. But yet that becomes my goal. And then what happens? Of course I fall into Yish. I picked something that's an impossibility. Haman, why are you making Mordechai your tachlis? And why are you making the Jewish people's destruction your tachlis? And why are you making the Jewish people's destruction b'yom echad your tachlis? You're making it harder for yourself. The answer is because, again, Haman is just a reemergence of this basic, which sounds like a very truthful and honest question of, are we there yet? And the answer is, well, I can handle the question and being told in a couple hours, and that's Torah Shabbat. But if you tell the kids in the back seat, we're in the car forever. Like, we're car people now. So, like, the kids are going to lose their mind. It doesn't work like that, right? It can't be worth it. You're telling me something that's impossible. So it falls apart. So he falls into Yish. So what? So this is the problem. So how is it possible? So how is it possible to remove this obstacle? Where in order to get to a tachlis, in other words, Yiddishkeit demands of us, Rebbeinu Shalom demands of us to move forward. To move forward, you have to have a destination in sight. But if the destination is Torah Shabbat Pedig, that means that there is no destination ultimately. Not only, by the way, philosophically speaking, more than that, not only is there a lack of motivation if it's forever, but then where are you going also? Like, where are you going? Just driving in circles forever, so I might as well just not drive and, what am I doing? So a destination which is Ein Sof is not a destination already. So so why not just stay right here? So that's what Amalek says. Just stay put. Like, where are you going? Rafu yidei min haTorah. The hands become weak. There's a lack of motivation, both in terms of I'm never going to be able to get there, and conceptually, where am I going anyway? Where am I going? So what's the answer to this? So Purim is the answer. Purim is the answer, and specifically with Yud Daled and Tesvav. Why? So this is the side that I mentioned before. I think I mentioned this at a few Farbrengens. I think it was Grad. It's a Farbrengen the guitar, I guess. So I guess we had a niggin before. So let's see, there's a klal by Primus HaTorah, and it's called the klal of Erichin, relativity. What does Erichin mean? Amalek is right. Torah Shabbat Peh is correct. See, the truth is as follows. Try to put it as simply as possible. There is no abstract, or there is no objective demarcation point in the world, or spiritually speaking, to say, that's where the Rebbeinu Shalom is. And until that point, you're now in Avodah mode, you're now in working mode, and when you cross over that threshold, and now you're in the place of Elokus, now it's a state of Menucha. That's the way we were thinking, and just Torah Shabbat Peh pushes that line to infinity. That whole notion is mistaken. The Rebbeinu Shalom there is no point, there is no line that that's what the Rebbeinu Shalom is and not before. The truth is, who the Rebbeinu Shalom is never possible to reach. Atzmiyusai, the essence of God, is always beyond our reach. And that's true. That's true. We say on Shabbos morning, I've mentioned this before, say on Shabbos morning, we add into the brachas of Kriya Shema, In Aruch Lecha, Efes Biltecha, Midai Melach. We say, Rebbeinu Shalom, there is none like you. There is no one to compare you to. There is nothing other than you. Those statements are not just saying, God, like you're amazing. That's saying that the essence of God is not anywhere that you go to find. That's true. But here's what's the amazing thing. That doesn't mean the essence of God is somewhere beyond the rainbow, beyond the horizon, beyond somewhere we can reach. It means that God's essence is truly everywhere. That's what it means. We say by davening again, we say this every morning, Atu Achlan Evra Olam, Atu Mishrav Hashem. You are the same God. You are the same way before creation as you are after creation. Really? Before creation, all there was you, and now there's a lot of other things. So doesn't that mean that you moved over to allow things to take space? Hashem moved over to a certain degree in terms of him being able to be experienced. Hashem's presence moved over. But who God is, God fills everything just now as he did before. And so the where we're trying to reach is not God. And before that line, we don't reach God. God is everywhere. The essence of God is everywhere. Which means that this is the conceptual next step, which means that wherever you are, God is equally there. He's equally present every single space that you're in, physically, mentally, and spiritually. Which means that every single point that you're in can be a tachlis. It can be a tachlis. But at the same time, it's also a place of avodah. It's also a place of avodah. In other words, what is our avodah? What is our job in this world if God fills everything? If God is the same as he was always? The answer is the purpose of our life is in order to work, in order to allow ourselves to try to experience, to whatever degree, the light of Hashem in that place. But that place that we try to experience God in is in truth a place of work. That's a place that we're trying to work to try to find, to try to reach Hashem. But it's also a place of absolute tachlis. That's also the destination itself. The God that you're finding in any particular level of your spiritual growth is God. God is not divided into many pieces and places and say, well, no, he's over there, and you have to work in order to get there. You have to work in order to find him. But whatever degree of finding that you accomplish is God. The Rebbeinu Shalom is Echad Yochad Yuchad, an absolutely one, indivisible reality, which means, like the Baal Tanya famously says, if you're hugging the king, it could be with a bunch of coats, between you and the king, but you're still hugging the king. The Baal Shem Tov said that a piece of the Rebbeinu Shalom is all of the Rebbeinu Shalom. In other words, Yiddishkeit, the concept of Erechin means the following thing, that everything is therefore relative. Everything is relative. To one person, the experience that they're having might be an experience of tachlis. Oh, they found God. And they're 100% right. Because the madrega that they're on right now, at that point in their life, the level of experience of menucha, the level of experience of tranquility, of peace, of feeling whole with their Rebbeinu Shalom is 100% true. Because to whatever degree that they're feeling, that's the Rebbeinu Shalom. And then you have another person who is on a different stage, a different level of avodah. And to that person, he looks down and says to the earlier stage, nah, that wasn't tachlis. That wasn't tachlis. And he gets to another, this is tachlis. And he's also right. Every single step along the way can be seen as a place of avodah and also a place of menucha. Because whatever degree of attachment to Hashem that you find in your particular life, in your particular level of ruchnius, that you gain that through your avodah and you reach that destination. What Erechin means that The place of menucha to one person might not be the place of menucha to another Jew, but that doesn't take away the fact that it's 100% menucha. It's true. So, because again, there is no objective place that the Rebbeinu Shalom is at, and you're sort of, you're making this mistake. Like, so in other words, like this: if the Rebbeinu Shalom is 100 miles away, so to speak, and whatever, make a joke like that. If there's an objective, a place, okay, he's 100 miles away. So if between me and that 100 miles, if along the way I think, and I have the feeling that I've hit it, I've reached the Rebbeinu Shalom, that's just a mistake. It's just not true. The Rebbeinu Shalom is 100 miles away, and I'm only mile 2. But because the Rebbeinu Shalom is not 100 miles away, the Rebbeinu Shalom is everywhere. The Rebbeinu Shalom is everywhere. And what is life about? Life is about continuing on and working to discover more layers of that God. But every layer of that God is God. Every layer of that God is the truth. Every layer of that God is the essence, is an expression of who the Rebbeinu Shalom is. These are just layers of us becoming, of our ability to experience that God. But who that God is, to whatever degree you're experiencing, is the truth. And so as you move along in your life, so there's a certain point in life, now I'm mamish working. And then you hit a plateau, like, oh, I found the Rebbeinu Shalom. Ani yadati, I know the Rebbeinu Shalom, I've met him, I feel close to him, everything makes sense to me, it's gavaldik. And then what happens? Then you move on to the next madreg and you realize, no, I have to work hard. I have to work harder. The menucha all of a sudden became not menucha because there's another layer that I have to reach. That didn't mean that it was a mistake at the time. It didn't mean that the menucha that you felt at the time was just a mistake and an illusion, and you realize, no, I didn't realize that there was more layers. Every layer that you reach is truth. Every layer that you reach is a state of menucha. You could have something that is menucha, but then relative to deeper layers, it's not menucha. But the deeper layers of avodah that's required doesn't negate the significance of the menucha that you experienced in earlier layers in earlier layers. That's what eruchin means. Everything is relative. The avodah, the menucha of a beinoni, for example, the menucha of a simple Jew, right, that's still a layer that is considered avodah for the tzaddik. But that doesn't mean that the tzaddik looks at the beinoni and says, like, you're mamish fooling yourself. No. When the beinoni says, wow, I'm in Gan Eden, and the tzaddik says that's Gan Eden, that's still Gehenna. They're both true. They're both right. That's the beinoni, when he's experiencing his level of Gan Eden in that madrega, it means that that he just peeled over and he's just experiencing a certain layer of the Rebbeinu Shalom's presence in that strata that he's in. And a piece of the Rebbeinu Shalom is the Rebbeinu Shalom, and that's true. And the tzaddik, who is a little bit more sensitive, who's compelled to go deeper, so he's unsatisfied with that level of divinity, and he wants to go deeper into the Rebbeinu Shalom. So to him, what is menucha to the beinoni is considered to be a state of warfare. It's still a battleground. It's still Gehenna. It's still avodah. But that doesn't take away from the truth of that state being menucha for the beinoni, and it also doesn't take away the truth from there being some level of menucha for the tzaddik too. So there is this idea. So in other words, the way to overcome, let's put it this way, the way to overcome this mania of accepting a Yiddishkeit and accepting a God that's infinite is by really realizing this truth, is that the Rebbeinu Shalom is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The God that you're looking for, you have to always keep on looking because God's infinite. That's Torah Sheba'al Peh. But he's also, but every layer that you come in contact with, and every layer that you fully perceive and you fully integrate into your spiritual consciousness is also tachlis. It's also menucha. That's also the Rebbeinu Shalom. He's not being divided into many pieces. Everything is relative. Everything is a step along the way in that process of discovering deeper layers of one single God. And so the tzaddik and the beinoni are both looking, they're both investigating, and they both at different stages in their investigation, in their search, feel a level of menucha, and they're both right. What's menucha to the beinoni is looked at as still the arena of avodah by the tzaddik, but they're both right. They're both true. And so every layer of avodah, in other words, tachlis, it means that every layer, every level of Yiddishkeit that we muster up strength in order to reach to, even if we know going in that there's going to be more layers beyond that, it doesn't take away from the fact that place that we are trying to reach is also a state of menucha, despite the fact that in a second later it'll be redefined as a state of avodah, and that's okay. That's okay because because it means that what is until everything that's every area that's still not there is on a certain level there, and every layer that's considered to be there relative to the next layer is not there yet, and that's okay. Because ultimately, we're all working within one sphere, which is the Rebbeinu Shalom's universe. And we're just trying all together to dig deeper into that and to try to experience this God that's in front of us. The same God is saturating every single one of our lives on all layers. And every single layer that we investigate, that we sort of develop the ability to connect to, that's called experiencing the Rebbeinu Shalom 100%. When you have the Arizal himself, Rishon Baruch Hu himself, and he says, Baruch Atah Hashem, Shahakol Nivlevar, and you have a 4-year-old kid that says a Shahakol, and they're both talking to Hashem. They're both talking to Hashem. It's the same Rebbeinu Shalom that they're talking to. When the kid says, when you ask the 4-year-old who is Hashem, he says Hashem is, Hashem is Hashem. To him, that layer of explanation that he has in his mind of who God is, that's menucha. That's it. That's it. He hit the bottom. Like that's God. The Arizal, and not even the Arizal, adults would say, no. What you think is the destination, you think that's menucha, that's still avoida. You have so many more layers to unpackage. That the maskana, the conclusion that you think you've reached, is it still a havamina? It's still a question that needs to be investigated further. But despite that, the kid is still 100% true. When he says God, he's talking to God. And when the Arizal on his level says God, and the Arizal felt that he reached his, maskana of who the Rebbeinu Shalom is, the Navi would say, no. Moshe Rabbeinu would say, there's more to go. And the Rebbeinu Shalom would say, even to Moshe Rabbeinu, there's more to go. Everyone, there's layers to go. And at the same time, whatever layer you hit, and whatever layer you're able to process within yourself, that's good. This is why Purim is a yontif that's able, it's a yontif, let's put it this way, the whole yontif of Purim is a yontif that's revolving around Achdus, it's revolving around unifying the Jewish people. The greatest way to unify the Jewish people is through this Nakuda. We're not undermining the different madrigas of Yidden. There's village Yidden, there's open city Yidden, there's walled city Yidden, there's all different types of Yidden. But it doesn't, and so we're not negating that. There are some Yidden that they're in a state of menucha already, and other Yidden will look at them and say, no, your mom is, you're not even close. But it doesn't take away from the legitimacy and the truth of the menucha that the smaller Yid feels. That's what Purim is about. Purim is about this inyan of being able to overcome that klipa, that question, that mania that stops you from accepting a Yiddishkeit that's always growing. This is why Purim is also revolving around the survival of the Jewish people being alive. In a spiritual sense, Yiddishkeit also, there's a difference between a dead Yiddishkeit, just in other words, what Haman wants is a dead Yiddishkeit. He wants a dead Jewish people and wants a dead Yiddishkeit. Purim is a celebration of a living Jewish people and a living Yiddishkeit. What does a dead Yiddishkeit mean? A dead Yiddishkeit means das is das. It means a tarsh b'chsav. It means it's in its corner, X amount of letters, X amount of words. There's a particular destination. It's 100 miles away. It's far, but it's reachable. That's it. A living, breathing Yiddishkeit is a Yiddishkeit that's always moving, right? It's always moving. In other words, where's the line? Where's the goal? It's always changing. That's a simon of life when things are constantly changing. The whole celebration of Purim is to celebrate a living, breathing Yiddishkeit. How could I fully accept a living, breathing Yiddishkeit if that Yiddishkeit if the line is always impossible to reach? The answer is the very question of Ayeshem B'Kerbeinu Ha'ayin is flawed. The Rebbeinu Shalom is with you and not with you at the same time, because what you're looking for is to experience God's essence, and to its ultimate degree, it's impossible. But because we're talking about God Himself, not just a vision of God, but God Himself, that means God's indivisible, which means whatever degree of connection you do have is both incomplete and 100% perfect at the same time. Now, if this sounds like a paradox, well, guess what? That's what Purim is about also, right? Everything about Purim is a paradox. What we're saying is that the revelation of Purim is a revelation that God is always beyond your reach, and but to whatever degree you think you've reached him, you've actually reached him. There's a lashon from the Zohar Kodesh. It says the following thing, and this sums it all up. And the Zohar says about the Rebbeinu Shalom that ihu tafis bekula almin, the less man the tafis bay. Listen to the words in English. God is grasped in all worlds, but no one grasps him. God is grasped in all worlds, but no one grasps him. Which one is it? It's both. If you're dealing, let's put it this way, more subtly. If you're dealing with the abstract, this feeling of God's presence, so okay, feelings can be, what level of feeling am I trying to get to? But once you're dealing with God's essence, and God's essence is beyond anything we can conceptually understand anyway. We're talking about something that's ultimately infinite. So once you're dealing with that, then any piece of experience that you have is ultimately limited, but it's 100% true at the same time. This is the side of Erechin, and that's what Purim is about. Let's go back. And so this is the key. This is why, again, Purim, the Yontif of Purim, celebrating the survival, the livingness, the life of the Jewish people, which means the life of Torah, that Yiddishkeit and God is alive. Kel Chai V'Kaim. What does it mean when we say the Rebbeinu Shalom is a living God, right? Chai Hashem. What Kivyochel Chas V'Shalom, that there be having mean that God is dead? What does it mean, a living God? What does that mean? We say it all the time, a living God. The answer is Kel Chai V'Kaim. Living God means a God that's always beyond you, that's always changing. Like on Sunday, I thought God was over there, and I thought he was attainable, and I thought if I did a certain avoid on Sunday, I'll reach him. And that was true on Sunday. But all of a sudden, Monday comes, and all of a sudden, everything is different. And everything's shifted beneath me, and God's now farther beyond my reach. So what does that mean about Sunday? So the menucha of Sunday was no good? No. Sunday was menucha, but it was only Sunday. And now you're ready by Monday. And Monday means that Sunday was avoididik. And you weren't there yet on Sunday. But now you're there on Monday. And guess what's going to be on Tuesday? Tuesday's going to be something's changing even more. But it doesn't take away from this. That's what Purim is, a celebration of an Am Yisrael that's chai and a kel chai. And the ability to, therefore, because of this, to accept fully of Tar Shebal Peh. This is the side, let's go back very quickly. This is why Purim is a yontif that celebrates the moon. Because let's understand, the sun versus the moon, very much bekitzer, without going into too many details, the sun always represents a destination. It means a destination. It means stability. It means das is das. Nothing's changing. Moshe Rabbeinu. When Moshe Rabbeinu is there, you have nothing to worry about. He's going to take care of everything. All of a sudden, what does Yeshua ben Nun mean? Yeshua ben Nun means the moon. The moon means not so pashut. It means avoida. It means going up, going down, things that are imperfect, trying to work it out. The Talmud versus the Rebbe. The Rebbe is the one that has conceptually, and the Talmud is always the one that's trying to reach. So the moon always feels incomplete. The very definition of moon is avoida. It means that you're searching for something. And what you're searching for is the sun. But comes Purim, and Purim says, it's taka true, you're a moon. That means that you have to search. But don't underestimate, but don't make the following, but you have to realize the following truth, which is that the area that you're searching is also tachlis. The God that you're looking for is also beneath the surface of where you are. Because even when you get to where you want, guess what? That's also an avoida klapi something else. So if the destination that you're looking for is still a place of avoida for the next madrega, then guess what? Where you are is tachlis compared to madrega before you. Which means that wherever you are, you're both working and both in menucha at the same time. The God that you're looking for is the God that you've already found on some level. That's the secret of Purim. So the ultimate simcha for the moon is the yontif of Purim. This is why Dafka, again, like I said, it's Esther Hamalka, it's Moondik, Mishenichnas, the entire month, which is a lunar cycle, is besimcha because of Purim. And every Yid is able to finally embrace Avodas Hashem, knowing that you'll never get there, but you'll always be there at the same time. That's the Yontif of Purim. That's the Yontif of Purim. This is why, let's go back quickly, this is the name of Shushan Purim versus regular Purim. So yes, 1 second. The day of Purim, you have Shushan, regular Purim is the day that the open cities are resting. And Shushan Purim looks at that day and says, nah, it's still Avodah. still got a lot of Amalekim to take care of. There's a lot of avodah there. And they say, no, okay, fine, so we rest the next day. But yet Shushan Purim recognizes Adar, the 14th day of Adar. So how does that work? The answer is, that's the secret of Shushan Purim. The secret of Shushan Purim is that at the same time, I recognize that I still need more avodah, but I'm still at the same time able to acknowledge that even in the avodah there was menucha. The fact that the tzaddik, that with Shushan Purim is in a higher stage, in a higher plane of avodah, and what was considered to be the tachlis for the open cities is still considered to be a work in progress for the big cities. That doesn't take away the big cities' ability to recognize that was tachlis for the small cities. That doesn't take it. It wasn't a mistake. There is no abstract demarcation point. That's where menucha is. It's always relative. It's always relative. And even Shushan recognizes the menucha of the open city. And even the open city has to recognize the lack of menucha that the tzaddik sees in its madrega. And we recognize each other. This is why Davka, it's Shushan Purim that is there to bring this point across. Because again, if you only had one day of Purim, okay, that would be the day of menucha, finished. But all of a sudden it comes Shushan Purim and says, no, the day of menucha to you is still avoida klapi the next madrega. But that doesn't mean we're taking away from the truth of it being the day of menucha. It's both true. It's menucha and mulchama at the same time. That's the secret of Purim. The secret of Purim is that you could have one yontif that's both a day of menucha and a day of mulchama, and it's all just relative. And they're both 100% true, just relative to where you are. That's the secret of Purim. This is why, like I said, it's dafka yishuv benun, and it's dafka the Indian of a walled city. Because a walled city means menucha. It means you're protected. Das is das. Das is das. But the secret of Purim is that even in that place that you would define as a place of menucha, it's still also a place of mulchama. It's also a place of mulchama. And so this is the dynamic that's going on with Purim, is that Purim is incomplete unless there's this revelation of both sides at the same time. That the Yontiv of Purim is a day that the same day can be recognized as a day of menucha for one and a day of mulchama for another, and it's still celebrated equally by both. Because there is no true definition of what's menucha and what's mulchama. It's all relative. And whatever degree of mulchama you're in, it's menucha vis-a-vis an earlier level. And whatever state of menucha you're in, it's avoida vis-a-vis a higher madrega, which means that everything is truth, and everything is any point in time when you're working to find the Rebbeinu Shalom was already there. And any point in time that you found the Rebbeinu Shalom was not there yet. And this is the side of what Rabbi Nachman talks about, that the ultimate tzaddik, what the tzaddik is supposed to bring to the world, is this truth that the Dari Mal, there's people that are high, people that think they've hit the place of menucha, and the tzaddik has to tell them, you haven't gotten anywhere. Mm-hmm. And the tzaddik then has to turn to the people that are Dari Mata, that feel that they can't even begin to climb because it's impossible. The tzaddik has to tell them, you're already there. What's the problem? You're already there. And so that yichud between heaven and earth, between the Dari Mal and Dari Mata, between regular Purim, which is, we're here. And Shushan Purim says, no, you're not there yet. Tomorrow you'll be there. But we're still recognizing that previous day as a yontif, as a day of menucha. That's the secret of Purim. And that unifies all Yidden. So the unification of Yidden is not that we're all the same, but it means that we're all striving and we're all working on different layers, but each layer is 100% true and 100% valid and 100% authentic. That's what Rebbeinu Shalom is. And so this is the secret. This is the secret of Purim. This is why, in a certain sense, this is going to sound a little bit funny, but just to end quickly, what's a walled city if you think about it? So you have ground, which is ground. It's low. You step on it, not so chashuv. And then you have people. People is the purpose of creation. That is chashuv. So usually we live on top of ground, right? We don't live underground. What's a wall? If you use the imagination a little bit, a wall is mechubel karka. A wall could be seen as sort of the extension of the ground above. So to a certain degree, a walled city means that you're living on the ground. You're living on the same layer, the same level as ground itself. So you have low Yidden, you have people that are holding on lower madregas, and to them, menucha is like a 4-year-old saying Hashem. Mm-hmm. And then you have a human being that's a chashuv person, that's a navi saying Hashem. Guess what? We're all the same anyway. Doesn't mean your mom is the same, but it means you're all the same. You're right, When the 4-year-old says Hashem, it's true, and when the Navi says and the Navi says Hashem, it's also not true. It's also not true. So they have that union. What's menucha is really not menucha. What's milchama is really not milchama, and that's the secret of Purim. That's the secret of Purim. It's ad lo yada. We all know that we don't know, and we all don't know that we know, and that's the secret of Purim. Rebbe should help us. We should be zeicha to feel that truth and be invigorated by the Yontif of Purim to keep on striving, keep on climbing, keep on always going. But the secret of being a Yid, and this is the Nakuda, the secret of being a Yid is to always want, to always feel like you're not there, but to always have a deep, deep spiritual satisfaction in that thought itself. And if a person feels that you're not there yet, and you're climbing, and you're trying, and you don't feel a shlemus in that search, it means you have to give more shalach manas. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not. You have to have more Purim, because Purim should satisfy. Should give a Yid that the drive itself, the search itself, should be deeply satisfying by itself. Should be zeicha to the yichud of those two things. The bias called tzedek me'er v'yimenu. I did not. But if we